Welcome to episode 2 of the podcast Ghosts, Demons, and Murder. Oh my. My name is Hayden Crook, and I will be your host for today's episode on paganism. So, first off, I wanted to give a historical context, historical background. I spent pretty good amount of time on research. I have some interviews I did with people from Facebook, just kind of a Q&A thing. I was supposed to have more, but a lot of the people did not um, reply to me. So we'll see how much time this takes. But I have a lot of stuff, a lot of good research and information. So um, yeah, get ready. Let's see. So paganism is defined as a modern religious movement incorporating beliefs or practices from outside the main world religions, especially nature worship. Constitutional Rights Foundation. Constantine emerged from the civil war as the new emperor. In 313, he proclaimed that every person was free to follow the religion which he chooses. Under Constantine, Christianity rapidly became the dominant religion. In 395, Emperor Theodosius made Christianity Rome's new state religion. Christians, who had so long been on the defensive, turned to attacking the pagan religion. They closed temples and banned sacrifices to pagan gods. They even transformed some pagan celebrations into Christian ones. For example, the church changed the birthday of the sun god on the 25th of December into the celebration of the birth of Christ, which I think is interesting. I did not know that. So, very, very interesting that a little bit of the background into paganism and how it was modified and changed. And we see this a lot in history. I'm kind of a history nerd, so I'm going to go on a tangent a little bit. Just we see a lot of this throughout history. And if you do a lot of research, that Christians and you know impose their beliefs on different groups of people because they were kind of seen as like defective for not following Christianity, different groups of people throughout history. So, I mean, this makes sense to me. It's unfortunate that these people, the early pagans, were persecuted for practicing their religion, but it happens a lot in history. So, okay. So now that we have somewhat of a brief background into the history of paganism, let's dive into their beliefs, rituals, celebrations, and other important aspects. So my first source is UMass. It's a pagan student organization that was founded in the fall of 1987 by Louis Stead and Alex Bergler. Hopefully I said these names right. They're two Wiccan undergraduates who were dissatisfied with a lack of public pagan groups in the area. The group is open to all members of different pagan faiths, as well as people who are interested in earth-based spirituality. So their basic beliefs on this website, it says paganism is a quickly growing spiritual movement consisting of various groups practicing nature-based polytheistic religions. Loosely based on the religions of the ancient world, our beliefs are incredibly varied, coming from various traditions, a reverence for nature and the physical world, and a belief in authoritarian religion. Some different names you might hear us use to describe ourselves: Wiccan, witch; heathen, asatru; druid, fairy, fairy tradition; solitary practitioner, eclectic, and many others. Pagans view the world as a place of joy and life, not of sin and suffering. We believe that the divine is here with us in the natural world, not in some faraway place in the sky. We hold a deep reverence for nature and the earth. Pagans tend to be earth conscious. Some pagans believe in a multiplicity of gods and goddesses. Others see them as merely names and forms that allow us easier contact with the divine. In most cases, pagans see the divine as present in both male and female principles. Pagans do not recruit members. We feel that every person reveres the divine in their own way and that no one religion is better than the other or than another. All right. Rituals. This next source is Harvard University. They had a lot of good stuff. So let's see. Pagan rituals commonly focus on honoring a deity or deities, observing natural cycles such as seasonal changes or the waxing and waning of the moon, or celebrating rites of passage such as birth, transitioning into adulthood, marriage, and death. Although the form of ritual varies by tradition, pagan rituals tend to engage the participants physically. Rituals often include drumming, chanting, and dancing. Some pagans offer food or drink to their gods or ancestors. These offerings may be shared by the participants as part of a feast or sometimes disposed of ritually. Representations of earth, air, fire, and water may also be employed for cleansing and consecration. For instance, participants might anoint themselves with salt water, which would be earth and water, and burn incense, air and fire, as part of ritual preparation. Building an altar, a place for divinity, and a sacred workplace for performing rituals is one of the first ways many pagans begin spiritual practice. Pagans often have altars in their homes, sometimes tucked in a corner of the bedroom. Pagans with yards, or those who live in rural settings, may build altars outside. The altar may contain natural objects, photographs of the beloved dead, ritual tools, and objects of beauty or personal power. At the altar, one might leave an offering for a deity, enter into meditation, create an herbal charm, or undertake a personal cleansing or healing ritual. Gazing at an altar is a reminder of one's spiritual life, and meditating there can lead to spiritual insight. Pagans might perform a wide variety of spiritual exercises on a daily basis, though probably no two pagans practice their faith exactly the same way. Pagan personal practice can be as simple as lighting a candle at the dark of the moon and meditating on the flame, or pouring a fresh cup of water for one's ancestors and saying a prayer. Spoken intention is thought to be very powerful. Pagans often believe that verbalizing their desires is the first step toward bringing change into their lives. Respect for this principle leads many pagans to choose their words carefully, lest a habit of self depreciation or pessimism interfere with achieving life goals. One important form of daily practice for many pagans is grounding meditation, which connects the individual with the energy of the earth and helps to maintain physical and emotional balance. Another is the practice of divination, which may take the simple form of asking about the day ahead or inquiring about a specific question. Some pagans consult astrology, while others use tarot cards, runes, or pendulums to access sources of spiritual knowledge. Others look to movements in the natural world, interactions with animals, plants, wind, and water, to gain intuitions about patterns in the local environment. The sense of connection gained through these practices helps pagans live out their belief that divinity is present in the world around them. For regular worship, some groups meet on a regular weekly or monthly schedule according to the availability of the members. Other groups time their meetings with a lunar calendar. Wiccans and other pagans believe that energy can be drawn down from the moon, and that this energy, often associated with female divinity, can be brought into a practitioner or channeled into a magical working. The full moon is a time of increase in abundance, considered the best time for raising energy or consecrating spells. The dark of the moon is considered a time for initiating a new beginning, exploring hidden matters, and contemplation. One typical Wiccan ritual is the full moon circle. Wiccans begin by purifying themselves and the space with water and incense. Next, a boundary is formed around the group by casting a circle, sometimes a physical circle on the ground or floor, but more often a symbolic or spiritual boundary drawn with a ritual knife, wand, or other object. The circle sets the place apart from ordinary space and time and serves as a container within which spiritual energy will be generated. Next, the participants invoke spiritual powers and deities and may share a meditation, poetry, or story that relates to the ritual's intention. Finally, the group dances, chants, and/or drums to raise energy. This activity may be merely celebratory, or the energy may be directed toward healing or transformation. At the end of the rite, the spiritual powers are thanked and the participants share food. Druid rituals are somewhat different, as in Wicca, a typical Druid ritual often begins with cleansing and purifying the participants in the ritual space. Instead of casting a circle, however, a sacred center is created around key symbols of Druidry, often the world tree, the fire, and the well, or in other groups, the tree, the stone of destiny, and the holy mound. The participants may then engage in a guided meditation or reading of liturgical poetry to frame the ritual's purpose. For the centerpiece of the ritual, offerings in the form of food and drink are made to various deities and spirits, after which divination is performed and interpreted for the group. To close, a cup of blessing is passed, and thanks are offered to the spirits and deities. In heathenry, the typical ritual observance is called a blot, which translates as offering. The ritual leader usually begins by blessing and warding the space with a hammer, the symbol of Thor. Readings from traditional texts may follow, as well as a statement of intention for the ritual. Next, deities are invoked, and a cup of mead or other beverage is blessed, as are the participants. The cup is passed around the group, and each person toasts to honor the gods or their ancestors, or to express other sentiments. The leftover drink is poured out as an offering to the gods before a formal closing. Pagans also celebrate a variety of rites of passage. In some pagan traditions, a blessing and naming ceremony is held soon after birth. In Wicca, it may be called a wickening, and considered a formal blessing given to young children from the goddess or the gods. Some pagans also celebrate coming-of-age ceremonies for their adolescent sons and daughters. For young women, this rite may be timed with first menstruation. Some pagan traditions have tradition-specific rites of marriage and partnership, but one common ritual practiced for couples of all genders is a hand fasting. Hand fasting rituals will generally include vows written by the couple and an actual binding together of their wrists with colorful cords or scarves. Among Wiccans, it may involve the good luck ritual of jumping over a besom, a broomstick made of twigs. Another distinctive ritual among feminist pagans is the croning rite, held to mark a woman's transition to the postmenopausal stage of wisdom when she becomes a community elder called a crone. The last ritual in the life cycle is the passage from life to death. For some pagans, death is one's final consecration in this lifetime. It is a passage to a spiritual world, and in some traditions, to rebirth and reincarnation. Pagans hold a variety of funeral rites, which may include telling stories about the deceased, toasting his or her memory, and rituals intended to ease the deceased's transition into the next world. So that was a little bit of rituals and practices. I know that was a lot of information. I think it was very informative and helpful. The different subgroups of paganism and the way they celebrate. There are some similarities, but like I said, each group does things a little bit different. So I thought it was kind of nice to include all those different groups and what they do. Okay, so a day in the life. This is the next section. This is also from Harvard University. Like I said, they had a lot of good research resources. Um, Says some pagans choose to wear sacred jewelry. Pagan symbols include the pentacle, an interlaced five-pointed star that is often worn by Wiccans. The star is pointed up to align with an upright human body, with one point up for the head, and outward and downward facing points for the arms and legs. The pentacle is a symbol of life and the union of the elements earth, air, water, and fire with spirit. Though it has often been misrepresented as a symbol of evil in popular horror films, not all pagans use the pentacle as a religious symbol. However, pagans who follow a Northern Europe path may wear Mjolnir, hopefully I said that right, Thor's hammer, a traditional religious pendant worn by those resisting Christian conversion in medieval Scandinavia. Images of natural objects such as trees or abstract goddess figures are also popular among pagans. Many pagans practice magic, often spelled with a K to differentiate it from stage magic and the fanciful magic of fantasy novels. In paganism, magic is a spiritual practice aimed at creating change in the individual and in the world. Magic functions somewhat like prayer in other traditions, but it tends to have more of a physical component than prayer usually does in the West. When pagans do magic, they begin by stating a clear intention and then raise energy to support that intention. This might be done, for instance, through chanting and dancing, breath exercises, or concentration. The energy is then released, either out into the world or sometimes into an object that will serve as a focus for the intention. The latter could be a candle, a piece of jewelry, or an altar object. Pagans often feel that magic cannot be successful without a practical component. Pagans generally do not proselytize, and while classes and retreats may introduce people to the path, the initiative to practice is with each individual. Some pagans also participate in other religious communities, such as churches or synagogues. From the 1970s through the early 1990s, the source of growth in paganism was through small groups, variously called groves, nests, covens, or circles. After the mid 1990s, the availability of the internet and communications technology increased access to religious material for geographically isolated pagans who slowly grew into a majority in the movement. Okay. Next section is diversity and inclusion. And again, this is still from Harvard. This is my source, Harvard University. Pagan priestesses and priests are people who have practiced a pagan spiritual path for some time and have trained in group ritual. Although in some groups, especially in women only feminist groups, the role of leading rituals is rotated among members, others recognize high priests and priestesses who have an additional level of training and experience. Hopefully, I say this name right. Susanna Budapest, for example, served as High Priestess of the Susan B. Anthony Coven Number 1 in Los Angeles, the first visible women's coven in the United States. Describing herself as a hereditary witch born into a long line of traditional healers, Budapest is a controversial figure in the movement for a variety of reasons, including her use of spells to stop rapists. In 1975, her arrest and conviction for reading tarot cards politicized the local community of Venice, California, which fought for 9 years to overturn unconstitutional laws declaring unconstitutional laws declaring divination illegal. Gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, and queer identified people have also found empowering religious practices in paganism. Because most pagans believe that the body and sexuality are holy, pagan communities tend to affirm all loving, consensual adult sexual relations. In contrast to many other religions, LGBT and queer pagans can hold positions of leadership and be open about their sexual orientation and gender expression. In paganism, gender fluidity is associated with shamanic talents. An unusual gender expression may be considered valuable in priests and priestesses. Although paganism offers special opportunities for women and sexual minorities, it is not unfriendly to heterosexual men. American Druidry, for instance, has produced a number of highly respected male leaders, including Isaac Bonewitz and John Michael Greer. Men seeking a community that embraces more conventional gender roles have also found a home in various branches of heathenry, which is Northern Europe paganism. They, Thor and Odin and those gods and goddesses. As a movement, paganism continues to embrace an enormous diversity of gender expression and roles, which I find refreshing because there seems, with other religions and religion in general, it seems diversity and inclusion is kind of looked down, and you know, you can't participate fully and stuff if you're different from what people deem to be normal. So I like that there's diversity and inclusion in paganism. I think that's comforting to me. Like, there's a group out there that are accepting of anybody. The next part is celebrations. Harvard University still. This is my main source. Like I said, they had a lot of good stuff. I feel like it's not biased. It's very open and honest and accurate. So, nature oriented and eclectic pagans often celebrate the Wheel of the Year, a framework of celebration that comes from Wicca. The 8 Wiccan holidays are called Sabbats and include the winter and summer solstices, the spring and fall equinoxes, and the 4 midpoints between them. The ritual calendar is based on Old Anglo Saxon and Celtic traditions. The winter solstice, known as Yule, is celebrated around December 21st, the time of year when the nights are longest and the days shortest. The solstice is also the inception of the light that will grow as days lengthen once again. Some pagans stay up the entire night to greet the returning light, described by some as the birth of the sun god, which we talked about earlier, that when the Roman Christians took over, they changed it from Yule and the sun god, the birth of the sun god, they changed it to Christmas, which is interesting. The spring equinox, which takes place around March 21st, is named for the Germanic goddess Ostara and celebrates the balance between the light and the dark. The summer solstice, called Litha, is the inverse of the winter solstice. This day of the longest light, June 21st, is often celebrated with all-night vigils and bonfires, and it's the crest of the summer and the forerunner of the harvest. The fall equinox, called Mabon, takes place on or around September 21st, again a day of balancing of dark and light. In many traditions, the autumn equinox is a harvest festival. Evenly spaced between these are the 4 other festival holidays. Imbolc is celebrated on or near February 2nd, a day dedicated to Brigid, the Irish triple goddess of smithcraft, poetry and healing. Christianity, here we go again, adapted the celebration into Candlemas, and as in ancient times, candles are often lit or blessed for use in the coming year on this festival day. It is a time of new beginnings and for formulating desires for the year to come, as well as a favored holiday for initiations. The springtime early summer festival of Beltane occurs around the 1st of May. In celebrating the generative energy of the season, pagans also honor the energy of sexuality and the fruitfulness of union. Many pagans celebrate Beltane with a maypole dance, a ritual in which participants perform a simple circular dance while holding strands of ribbon attached to a central pole. The result is a colorful braid wrapped around the pole. Often a wreath of flowers is placed at the top of the pole, and this wreath slowly descends the pole as the braid is woven. The dance is playful and exuberant, with participants often decked in colorful costumes. Following the maypole dance, there is a feasting and basket of flowers are sometimes exchanged. Don't know if it's kind of the same, but the connection I'm making is I don't know if you've seen the movie Midsummer. That's what I'm kind of thinking of with the May Queen and the flowers and the celebrations and the feasts. That's what that kind of reminded me of. I'm not sure if it's exactly the same thing, but I guess we'll see. Maybe someone can let me know. We'll see. On the 1st of August is the Summer Harvest Festival, Lugnasad, also known as Lammas. Those who practice Irish traditions often honor the god Lugh at this holiday, as well as his mother Teltu, whose funeral games were traditionally held at this time. Wiccans often celebrate it as the wake of the Sun King. In a common Wiccan myth, the Sun King comes into being at the winter solstice, achieves union with the goddess at Beltane, and dies at the summer solstice so that the wheel of life can continue. This late summer harvest festival is his wake, at which fruits of the harvest will be honored and shared. Samhain is observed on the eve of November 1st. This holiday marks the beginning of winter and the new agricultural cycle. Samhain and the eve of Samhain were widely observed even after the Christianization of the British Isles. Christians' observance of All Saints' Day on November 1st and All Hallows' Eve, Halloween, on October 31st, created a new context for this popular observance. Samhain is believed to be the night when the living can most easily communicate with the dead, especially beloved family members and ancestors. The beginning of winter, the time of death and decay in the wheel of the year, is said to be when the veil between the worlds of the living and the dead is the most permeable. The masks and images of ghosts and spirits that abound in popular celebrations of Halloween derive from the ancient belief that the dead can manifest themselves or manifest in the material world on this night. For American pagans today, Samhain is a time to meditate on loved ones who have passed away, meditative trance journeys to communicate with ancestors or deceased family and friends are part of many Samhain rituals. Some pagans also honor their ancestors with a dumb supper, a feast eaten in silence with a full plate and an empty chair left open for the beloved dead. And this kind of reminded me of the Day of the Dead celebration that the Hispanic culture participates in. This is what it kind of reminded me of. I think it's interesting that Christians observe Halloween since it's a pagan, always has been a pagan celebration. Interesting stuff. We're going to talk more about Christianity and we're going to get more into that later. I have a whole soapbox about that. Other pagan traditions celebrate seasonal transitions as well, but with differences in timing and meaning, heathens have 8 main common holidays that mark seasonal turnings, but they are less fixed to specific dates. Yule Blot, for example, is usually celebrated between December 19th and December 26th. It may involve honoring the ancestors as well as the returning light. Instead of Beltane and May 1st, heathens celebrate Walpurgisnacht, a holiday devoted to Freya and other goddesses. Winternacht is observed around October 31st, and while it may include honoring the dead, other groups mark the beginning of winter by making traditional offerings to particular gods and spirits. Some heathens also celebrate additional holidays in honor of various gods and ancestors. These may include Day of Remembrance for those martyred during the Christianization of Northern Europe. Other Reconstructionist religions also look to historical celebrations for their holidays. For example, Hellenic, Greek Reconstructionist, pagans often observe festival days in honor of the Olympic gods such as Hera, Apollo, and Artemis. Pagan holidays, like pagan rituals in general, are focused on nurturing relationship between pagan and the land, their gods, their ancestors, and each other. For many pagans, the expression of joy and gratitude for blessings received is a central part of their religious practice. The many celebrations of the pagan ritual year reflect the life affirming attitudes that characterizes contemporary paganism. So, yeah, that's some of the celebrations. And I mean, I know there's some similarities, there's some differences. Um, it's interesting how a lot of the holidays that Christians and a lot of people celebrate today were actually pagan rituals. Were originally and started out as pagan rituals, but over time they got kind of names changed. The way they were celebrated changed. It's very interesting. Okay, so the last segment of today's podcast episode might offend or cause some controversy of opinion. So if you don't want to hear my interview questions and stuff on Christianity versus paganism, then please stop at this portion of the podcast. I don't want to offend or upset anybody, but yeah, we're going to talk about Christianity and kind of their attitude towards paganism and pagans in general. And I interviewed different groups of people that practice paganism and asked them a bunch of different questions, and we're going to get into that right now. So, the first interview I did was with, I don't know how to say the name, I'm probably going to butcher Weben. So I asked them, what branch of paganism do you practice? And they said, I'm Kemetic. Specifically, I'm a Kemetic Reconstructionist. Our religion could be referred to either as Kemeticism or Kemetic religions. I prefer the latter because it's not as much of a tongue twister. But I also don't like to repeat words too frequently or too close together in my writing, so I appreciate having options. When I first started learning about being Kemetic, the term was only used to refer to pagan religions, which were mostly, like at least 80%, derived from ancient Egyptian religions. But today it becomes a little more inclusive. More on that later. Kemetic Reconstructionism is one of several Reconstructionist faiths within paganism. Reconstructionism is characterized by a focus on a single culture without mixing in concepts or practices from religions not belonging to that culture. We place a high value on original or academically respected sources and believe that understanding the culture and history of the people who originally practiced the religion we're focused on is important to supply context for their beliefs and practices. The context of an ancient religion, sorry, my throat is dry, excuse me. The context of an ancient religion is important in understanding why a practice was done and why it was done the way that it was done, so that we can better bring those practices into our modern world in a way which is practical, respectful, and preserves their original meaning or purpose. We Kemetic Reconstructionists are fully aware that we are not ancient Egyptians living in ancient Egypt and are not afraid to alter or omit practices if they are no longer appropriate or possible for a modern practitioner. We do prefer traditional forms over modern innovations. However, if change is not necessary, then we use the original. And if it is necessary, we usually prefer to substitute alternate traditional practices, which would have hopefully made sense to the priests and devotees of the ancient religion. We will create modern practices or associations when needed. We just like to keep track of our sources, and it's a rare thing, at least in Kemetic Reconstructionism, that an important issue is completely unaddressed by the original form of the religion. We follow traditional forms as a way of honoring our spiritual ancestors, and because we believe that practices which have been handed down and repeated over such long periods of history carry power within them, I think this pretty much goes for all kinds of Reconstructionists. I then asked, is there any diversity and inclusion within this branch? They said yes, Kemetic has become kind of an umbrella term within the larger umbrella term of pagan. Aside from Kemetic Reconstructionists, there is Kemetic Orthodoxy, which takes a revivalist, approach to the religion. They blend in a few practices from other African traditional religions and have added or substituted a few of their own creations. There are also Cometics, who are not affiliated with any temple or with small groups of their own, and they may have a variety of approaches as well. Then there are the Kemetic pagans who worship ancient Egyptian gods, but may also combine their understanding of ancient Egyptian religions with practices or ritual forms from other pagan faiths. And there, there are the Tamarin Wiccans who practice Wicca, but have chosen ancient Egyptian deities to be their representation of divinity. I view these different religions as different cities along a virtual Nile. Some are closer together and may even share a similar dialect, while others are far apart. But they're all in Egypt, so they can all be called Kemetic. And of course, Kemetic religion is not exclusive or evangelistic, so practitioners are welcome to worship gods from other pantheons as well. It's generally just requested that ancient Egyptian deities be approached in a manner which is respectful to Kemetic customs. But there are also no Kemetic police out there enforcing this. Then there's the question of inclusivity, based on things like race, gender, sexual orientation, etc. In general, Kemetic religions accept people who identify as any of these things. Ancient Egyptians were pretty xenophobic toward foreigners and foreign countries, but they were accepting of people who were willing to move to Egypt and take up traditional Egyptian practices. Ancient Egypt was a major crossroads for trade, and so was relatively cosmopolitan for the ancient world, containing people with a range of skin tones. Kemetic religions carry on this tradition in accepting people from any racial or ethnic background who would like to consider themselves Kemetic and are willing to take up the worship of our gods in a few Kemetic traditions. For example, honoring and upholding Ma'at, hopefully I said that right, reverting and consuming offerings after the gods have had them, and honoring the Aku, our beloved dead. There is a social movement which also calls itself Kemetic, however. I've recently met a member who is accepting of other races engaging in Kemetic religion, but that hasn't been representative of most of my encounters. The core purpose of the social Kemeticism seems to be in establishing a positive sense of historical identity for people with darker skin tones. Most of these people had their heritage stolen from them through the practice of slavery. No matter what kind of records their family may have been able to keep, it always ends with a human being who was abducted from their homeland, stripped of their identity, and sold on an auction block. The descendants of these people therefore lack something which the rest of us take for granted. As a result, they are heavily invested in the idea of ancient Egypt as a black culture, and in the past many of them have been quite adamant that that as a white person I should not be allowed to worship ancient Egyptian gods or participate in ancient Egyptian anything. Many people coming to Kemetic religion as people of non-African descent are afraid that we will also treat them this way. In the case of gender, several of our gods engage in a bit of gender bending themselves. The goddess Nit, for example, is described as being two-thirds male and one-third female. The god Happy is grammatically treated as male, but is routinely portrayed with pendulous feminine breasts to emphasize his nurturing abundance. Diverse gender identities don't interfere with a life lived in accordance with Ma'at, and are good enough for the gods, so we see no problem with them. Likewise, so long as only consenting adults are involved, sexual orientation doesn't have anything to do with the practice of our religion and doesn't hurt anybody. Many people think that Set, also called Sudek, they're both correct names, is a patron god of homosexuality because of an interaction he had with Heru, who the Greeks call Horus, but most Cometics prefer to use the Egyptian names. This is not accurate, and I'd be happy to explain why, but it's not a family-friendly subject and might not be appropriate for your podcast. That I might have to look into that. We love some spicy Egyptian information. I might have to contact them again and get more information about that because that would be interesting. 3. What are some of your rituals or rites that you do? Most practitioners of Kemetic religion have some sort of general ritual which can be used for regular interaction with the gods, goddesses, or deities they honor. Most of us do not try to worship them all, there are a lot of them. Ancient Egyptian religion did not involve the casting of a circle, but ritual purity is important, so most of us will take a ritual purification bath or engage in some sort of personal cleansing before any formal ritual. And the ritual space itself will also be purified. Kemetic pagans and Tamarin Wiccans may or may not include a casting circle. A circle casting, my bad. Different groups may have different names and formats for their rituals, but they usually include an invocation or welcome to the deity being worshipped, the lighting of candles and incense, preparation of offerings, a space for prayer, meditation, and our Heka, which is what we call our style of magic, followed by a reversion of offerings and some sort of closure to the ritual. The physical remains of the offering are then consumed by the ritualist as a way of taking the blessing of the god or goddess into their body. It completes the cycle of giving between the worshiper and the god and is a kind of sacrament rich in symbolism. Disposing of offerings without consuming them is generally viewed as disrespectful in the context of Kemetic religion. Offerings are also made to the Aku and may or may not be part of a ritual honoring a god. We have rituals for celebrating the new moon, crescent moons, and full moon. Prayer does not require purification and can be done at any time. Informal offerings can also be made without formal ritual, simply by speaking to the god or goddesses and inviting them to enjoy the offering a person has brought, then leaving them on the altar or designated sacred space if the person doesn't or can't have an altar. And they do this for a short period of time. It doesn't take long for the gods to consume the spiritual part of an offering, and since it's expected that the physical portion will be eaten, it's important not to leave them long enough to become unappetizing or inedible. That's what I have to say for now. I need to run an errand, but we'll write more for the rest of the questions later. I help moderate a Kemetic Reddit at I'm gonna post this in the podcast description when I upload this. I'm gonna copy and paste that or save that right now. They said you can reach out to other Comedics in that group as well and ask questions and figure out stuff. So then they they messaged me a couple days later and we're on question 4. What celebrations do you choose to celebrate? Holidays usually vary somewhat from one Kemetic to another because each temple has its own set of festivals, specifically for the god or goddess who was housed in that temple. The only holiday shared by all Kemetics is Wep Renpet. Otherwise, we tend to pick out the holy days, which are significant to the gods we worship. Many ancient Egyptian calendars take all the known festivals from every surviving temple list, which results in a lot of holidays. It can be absolutely overwhelming, so picking and choosing is necessary. The following holidays are the most commonly celebrated by the 2 Reconstructionist groups I was active in. The biggest celebration of the year to me is Wep Renpet, which translates as the opening of the year. It's the start of the Kemetic calendar and coincides with the first day that the star Sirius rises enough to be visible above the horizon. This varies based on location, but generally falls somewhere in July or August. Most Kemetics calculate their Wep Renpet, also called Wep Ronpet, date based on where they live. Every year, however, a few folks will suggest that we should all select an important site in Egypt and calculate Wep Renpet for this location so that our calendars will all line up and we can celebrate as a community no matter where we are. It's a great idea in theory, but good luck getting everyone to agree on which site to use. As I mentioned, I used to be a member of a couple of IRL Kemetic Reconstructionist temples in the San Francisco Bay Area, though I moved into a different state now. While I was there and those two sister temples were active, we used to get everybody from both temple groups together to celebrate Wep Renpet. So it was my favorite time of year. One very special year, our sister temple in Denver even flew out to join us. Everybody would bring offerings of food, drinks, and flowers, and we'd also bring the sacred images we used in our domestic practices to place on an outdoor altar. They'd soak in the sunshine and be rejuvenated for the year in a ceremony called Kissing the Face of Ra. The main Wep Renpet ritual honored the goddess Sekhmet and asked for her protection in the coming year. After the ritual, the offerings would be reverted and laid out banquet style on a picnic table along with side dishes and desserts. And we'd all eat together and talk about books or articles we were reading, projects we were working on or dreaming up, and plans for the year, as well as the usual gossip and joking around. It was a great experience of face to face interaction and community, which is rare for members of a religion which is relatively uncommon and whose practitioners tend to be spread thinly all over the world. So, this kind of thing is especially precious. The beautiful Feast of the Western Valley tends to be in November or December. This is a 2 day festival honoring the Aku, our beloved dead. A person's Aku usually includes their family and ancestors related by blood, but it can also include friends, teachers, role models, and anyone the person feels was important enough in their life to honor in this way. Many comedics, including myself, also include pets who have crossed over because we consider them to be family too. This is a time to visit with loved ones who have gone to their horizon, make offerings and libations, tell them how much we love and cherish them, and generally make sure they're doing well wherever you believe spirits go when they pass. There's also the mysteries of Osir or Osiris, another celebration from the Aku, and the king of the afterlife, Osir. We usually celebrate it in December. Part of the ritual involves acting out the lamentations of Aset, Isis, and Nebethet, Nephthys, as they mourn the death of Osir. The celebration of the rite is the raising of the Djed pillar, which represents the resurrection of the god, and through him the opening of the afterlife to all of humanity, and not just the royals, as was the case in early periods of ancient Egypt. Finally, there's the brilliant festival of the Lights of Nit, a celebration honoring this great creatrix goddess whose name is pronounced Niet. So I've been saying it wrong. My bad. Was known to the Greeks as Nith. Nith. It usually occurs in June or July. During this festival in ancient Egypt, lights would be placed in little papyrus boats and floated on the Nile. And the sacred lake next to Niet's main temple. We don't have a Nile, so we recite all the appropriate hymns as we each anoint a floatable candle with myrrh and frankincense oils and set them free in a wide, shallow bowl of water as an offering to Niet. It's quite beautiful. It's quite beautiful. Aside from these group rituals, I lost my place, my bad. Aside from these group rituals, in my own personal practice, the goddess Bastet is very important. Unfortunately, the temple of Bastet at the city of Bubastis was almost completely destroyed, so we don't have much information on her festivals or how they were celebrated, aside from Herodotus's description of the great festival of Bastet. There seems to have been a lot of lifting of skirts, body jokes, and drinking, but I'm not flashing anyone and I'm too shy to tell dirty jokes. I can do the drinking though. I'm still trying to figure out the best way to celebrate this festival in modern times, but it usually occurs in February or March. Then there's the Feast of Chewing Onions for Bastet. Nothing seems to be known about this festival, but at least the name is pretty descriptive. It happens in November or December, and I usually celebrate by trying to include onions in as many dishes for the day's meal as possible. To the ancient Egyptians, onions were reminiscent of the sun in that they were yellow and round. They also believed that strong tasting foods were particularly healthy for you, so eating sun like onions with kind of strong flavors that gives a person good health was a fitting way to celebrate this solar lady of life, who was also known as the Lady of Fools. I then asked, what are some common misconceptions? I think that the most common misconception among the general public, including me before I became Kemetic, is that ancient Egyptian religion is some kind of death cult, and that the ancient Egyptians were obsessed with death and everything revolving around preparing to die. It's understandable because most of what we found, and therefore most of what we knew in the early days of Egyptology, came from tombs, so our subject matter was pretty biased. Funerary practices and things from tombs are going to be about death 100% of the time, guaranteed. And by now, the old stuff is all public domain. So it's really cheap to print and it is often easily available to curious readers. In an effort to learn more, I signed up for a practice course on religion at university because their subject matter was supposed to include ancient Egypt. I learned that the ancient Egyptians made mummies and pyramids and that their writing and their gods looked funny. That's it, and we moved on. That's all most people know if they know anything. After joining the Kemetic community, I quickly learned how important it was to check the first printing date of anything I was considering buying, to keep my sources as recent as possible. But we've gradually been building up our knowledge of life in ancient Egypt, and from all appearances, it was a vibrant experience, deeply beloved by the Egyptian people and described by a unique worldview which still provides Kemetics today with fascinating insights and enjoyment. In fact, the ancient Egyptians loved life so much that they envisioned their afterlife paradise. It was pretty much the same as their life on Earth, only without sickness, hunger, or death. The most important thing you could ever do in ancient Egyptian society was live. Among other pagans, the biggest misconceptions I've ever encountered have been about my Reconstructionist approach. Some people feel that we're playing at being ancient Egyptians and are somehow unaware of or in denial about living in a modern world. Some think that we're completely stuck on the idea of recreating ancient Egyptian religion exactly as it was and are unwilling to change anything under any circumstances. Some think that we spend our time in the community, and perhaps our private time too, judging and looking down on other paths for not being as historically accurate as we think we are. I don't know who these people met, but I'm very sorry for what they went through. To be fair, though, some of them have seemed a little determined to be persecuted, even insisting that I'm wrong about the nature of Reconstructionism because they met some Reconstructionists and they know better than I do. Apparently, me actually being a Reconstructionist and having spent time in two Reconstructionist temples with other Reconstructionists doesn't count for as much as I'd have thought. The next question is, do you feel like Christians and other denominations look down on you? Let's see. Sorry, I lost my spot again. I have a lot of notes. 27 pages of notes, everybody. And we're on 17. Do you feel like Christians and other denominations look down on you? Oh, I'm sure they would. Monotheistic religions, at least, seem to have religious intolerance kind of built into them. Polytheistic religions tend to be more accepting. After all, what's a few more gods in the area when you already have a pantheon? But Kemetic religion seems to be obscure enough that we're not on anyone's radar yet. No one expects the Kemetics. The thing about Christianity, though, is that they believe that their God is going to punish anyone who doesn't worship him with some kind of eternal torture. It's a pretty scary thought. It would naturally make a person fearful for anyone they cared about, and a kind hearted person might feel responsible for saving as many people as possible. That's a lot of pressure and a lot of stress, and I honestly feel bad for the people trapped in that kind of mindset. That's no way to live, in my opinion. It's certainly not what I would want for my loved ones, but they're all Christian, and hopefully they stay because they find that path to be spiritually fulfilling and it enriches their life, and not just because they're too afraid to leave. I know how hard it can be to leave. It's not my business, though. They're adults and make their own choices. I just try to worry. worry them as little as worry them as little as I can. I don't speak openly about my religion in front of my family because I've learned that it makes them uncomfortable. They know I'm pagan, but it's been so long since I've tried talking to them about this that they don't know exactly what I am. Sometimes it seems a little unfair because they can talk about their religious practices freely and even invite me to religious celebrations, which I attend for the sake of spending time with my family and making them happy. But I know that they would never, but I know that they would never, could never do the same for me. Kemetic religion isn't evangelical, and they clearly don't have any practical use or an understanding sorry, or an understanding of our beliefs or practices and how those affect my life. But I guess it still kind of hurts because it's something which is such an important part of my life, and it feels like they don't care enough to be interested in something like that. But part of me also understands is because of the fear. As for Christians outside of the family, I'm not so much worried about them looking down on my religion as I am about things like them harassing me or costing me my job. When I was growing up in Alabama, it was common for certain preachers on campus to scream at anyone they disapproved of as we walked by. When I went out for a walk alone downtown at night, it was a small college town, I'd frequently get mobbed by a group of Christian witnesses, which could honestly get a little scary. I moved out of Alabama to a more progressive state, but I still lost my job twice on the basis of religious discrimination before I learned to keep my mouth shut and blend in. Technically, religious discrimination is illegal here in the States, but how is anyone supposed to prove it? Unless they send you a signed statement or use explicit language in a place where they're being audio recorded. It's impossible to prove what someone was thinking when they fired you. You could accuse them of holding your religion against you, but all they really have to say is, no, I didn't, and use your case crumbs into hearsay. Not only that, but now they're angry with you and you've just demonstrated how easy it is to get away with these kind of things. So I hide. Fortunately for comedics, most Christians can tell the difference between an ankh and a cross. I could also wear other religious symbols like Bastet's sacred cat, and people just don't recognize things as symbols of a practicing religion. On occasions where I've worn a sacred cat pendant, the people who've seen it think I just really like cats. And I do really like cats. So I just go along with it and start talking about cats instead. But I don't wear those necklaces anymore. If other religions who don't have the power to harm me also disapprove of my choices, that's up to them. I've got my hands full with what I'm doing, so I don't need to worry about what anyone else is doing. And I did ask about if I felt like TVs and movies, specifically American Horror Story Coven and The Craft, accurately portrayed paganism. I know that these choices that I picked don't tie into Egyptian paganism or Kemeticism, but I still asked. They said, "LOL, has there ever been a show that portrayed paganism accurately? If they tried, it might just be kind of boring. Not nearly sensationalist enough. We're just people after all. We pray, we try to live ethical lives, we do rituals. The Christians do rituals too. They just call them services, as in Sunday service or masses. Many of us do believe in magic, but in my opinion, magic is just taking your understanding of how the world works on a spiritual, energetic level and intentionally applying it toward a specific goal. And it doesn't come with all the flashy special effects like in the movies. Real magic is subtle. On rare occasions, the incense, smoke, or candle flames might do cool things, but that's not something you can really expect. And it's not necessary. Also, magic doesn't summon things out of thin air. It works more like a probability enhancer in my experience. You can pull some strings, nudge things onto the right track, but the results will manifest in a natural way. And you still need to put in some kind of effort to open that door. Magic may enhance probability, but a million times to zero still equals zero. So, it makes little sense to use magic to try to get a job, for example, and then not apply anywhere, or look for job openings. The style of magic native to Egypt is called Heka. By the way, Heka is also the name of a god who has close connections with the concept of Heka or magic. You often see him in the company of two other gods named Sia and Hu. Sia means perception or knowledge. Hu means authoritative utterance command. To work, Heka, you need to have knowledge of how things work on a spiritual level, be able to perceive their potential, then command it into becoming with an authoritative utterance. The ancient Egyptians were big believers in the power of the spoken word. But you didn't ask me about magic or Heka. I got off on a tangent, which is totally fine. I appreciate all this information that you gave me, so you're totally fine. I've never seen American Horror Story Coven, but I feel confident in assuming that it wasn't accurate. I have seen The Craft, and I know that one's not accurate. But although I spent a year or two in Wicca on my way to Kemetic religion, a more appropriate movie to my path would be any of the Mummy franchise, Gods of Egypt or Stargate. And man, they're all terrible. I don't know who's responsible for the casting in Gods of Egypt, but they weren't even trying. Nephthys looks more like a Celtic god than an Egyptian one. I don't subscribe to the idea of ancient Egypt is a black civilization, but they certainly weren't white. Stargate, I refuse to watch because the idea of the ancient Egyptian gods being aliens is born of racist ideas that it's more believable that aliens came down and built the pyramids and any other wonders of Egypt than African American people or African people were capable of doing. The Mummy movies, however, are entertaining in their god awfulness. Anubis gets a pretty bad rap being cast as a villain, which is very unfair and uncool. He's actually very kind with a warm, reassuring presence, but I still watch the movies and I root for the mummy. Sadly, he is yet to catch all the tomb robbers. So that was my first interview. Thank you so much for sharing this information with me. I really appreciate it. I thought it was really fun. I really like the information that you gave, and your personality is just great. So thank you so much. Okay. We're almost to the end. I'm starting to lose my voice. Okay, my next interview is CJ. They are a Celtic pagan with eclectic tendencies and practice mostly solitary paganism, or mostly solitary paganism, Wicca, witchcraft. Almost all paths are very diverse and inclusive by nature. Me and my wife will do protective rituals such as return to sender, positive attraction rituals, spiritual connection, and I don't know how to say this. I'm probably going to butcher it. Oneromancy. Oneromancy is a dream interpretation to divine the future or past lives. As a starter, we follow a lot of the celebrations. To name a few, we celebrate Mabon, Samhain, Ostara, Yule, Beltane, Imbolc, Litha, Lugnasad, plus many more. Some major misconceptions would be that we worship the devil, that we sacrifice animals and people, that we do dark magic, that we have real TV based magical powers. Real magic is intentional and takes time to have an impact on the world. Nothing is instant and nothing like on TV. It's mostly like practical magic, minus the raising the dead part. Also, that we are hateful, that we value all living things and beings and are worthy of respect. Also, misconceptions are that witches are Wiccan. All witches are Wiccan. Not all witches are Wiccans, but all Wiccans are witches. We know that Christians and Catholics and other denominations look down on us. Look at the Bible, Exodus 22:18. Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. You can also go to TikTok and see there's a lot of hate towards witchy people. I asked again about American Horror Story Coven and The Craft, if it was accurate. They said absolutely not. They're instant gratification and not plausible as an example. Like before he closest to you, Okay, sorry, hold on. Like before, he closest. Like before, the closest you will get to an actual depiction of paganism or witchcraft is going to be practical magic. It's not instant, and in the movie, there's an attraction spell that takes 20 years for it to attract her perfect man. That is much more realistic than chanting to stop someone's heart, and at the same time, they have a heart attack, like in the craft. As for my experiences, I've had people tell me I'm going to hell when I wore my pentacle necklace out and about, or when I would talk openly about paganism. I've had people tell me I should be burnt at the stake for my beliefs, to the point I stopped wearing my medallion or any indication of my religion in open sight. Thank you for sharing this with me. I'm seeing a trend. You're not able to wear your medallions, your symbols, your jewelry that represents your beliefs. Um, my first interview couldn't wear theirs either. I'm seeing a pattern with misconception, misunderstanding. Um, that is why I focused on paganism for this episode of my podcast. I kind of want to get the word out there, share information with people, and show that it's not weird. It's a religion, it's a lifestyle, it's connected with nature, spirituality, respect, diversity, include it's not a negative thing like a lot of people think. So that's mainly why I did this, to open my mind, my understanding, and hopefully help other people understand that. So thank you both for being vulnerable and sharing your experiences and your stories with me and with the listeners and everybody. I think it'll be very helpful. So thank you for that. And I'm sorry about the persecution and the judgment from Christians and other denominations. It's not cool. People should just let people be. All right. Which leads me to my last segment. we're gonna get we're gonna get we're gonna get even more controversial. Christianity versus paganism. So I don't know what denomination this is, what sect of Christianity, but it was Grace Communion International. It was an article they posted. And they said in this article that paganism is a controversial subject. Um can we use, let's see, lost my spot again. Can we use pagan customs in the Church of God? We already do. Simply because something has a pagan origin does not mean that it is sinful to use, even for religious use. Wedding rings were and are a pagan custom, and there is no biblical command for them, but we use them in church sanctioned ceremonies. Wedding ceremonies themselves were also a pagan custom, are not commanded in Scripture. Funerals include pagan customs too, based on erroneous ideas about the afterlife. Scripture says nothing about putting flowers on graves, or etc. Egyptian mythology said that the dead should be embalmed, and Joseph participated in this custom. They said the book of Genesis for that. That's their source. Despite its pagan origin, pagans created statues of animals and people, both life size and miniature. They had statues in their flower gardens and statues in their homes. But statues have lost their pagan connotations because people do not believe in such gods and goddesses anymore. Which I don't know. I don't know what sect of Christianity this is, but they're putting a lot. Money has pagan designs on it. Pagans assign days of the week to different gods, and we still use these names. So the question arises: how careful must we be in weeding paganism out of our lives? Where do we draw the line? The answer is different, and Christians draw the line in different places, and we need to allow some diversity on these issues. Some conservative churches used to forbid wedding rings, some forbid Christmas and Easter. They are careful to do what God says, and if God tells them to avoid paganism, then they carefully do it. Some are so careful that they err on the side of forbidding too much, but they err. They make commandments or commands about things that God doesn't command in the desire to avoid one sin, they commit another. I see that a lot in Christianity too. Two scriptures have been often used to argue against Christmas customs. Jeremiah 10 has nothing to do with Christmas trees. That custom originated in Northern Europe and has nothing to do with Jeremiah, who was centuries earlier. Book of Deuteronomy, chapter 12, has also been appealed to. But the verse doesn't forbid everything that the pagans did. God does not object to all worship practices of the pagan, such as prayer, sacrifice, and temple, but only the abominations that they did in worship. I'm not sure what the Christian, or when they were doing the Bible, what they saw was an abomination during the worship. If prayer, sacrifice, and temples are the same, I don't understand that. Let's see. Basically, if it's wrong any day of the year. That's the kind of custom we need to beware. But if a custom is harmless in July, then we don't need to condemn it in December. I'm sorry. I thought this was a pretty all right article, but this person is kind of all over the place, and but I'm tired, so I'm trying to. We can't let century dead pagans dictate what we can or can't do. They have no authority over our calendar. Okay, well, you can't blame pagans for the Christmas thing because it's like if you, I don't know. This is interesting. No one has to participate in Christmas or Easter, but we should not condemn those who do. Some will do it one way and some will do it another. Whether you participate or whether you abstain, do it all to the Lord and let Him be the judge. This is the Christian approach to the cultural situation today. Mm, I don't see that. Honestly, with a lot of stuff, I see there's people that I know who claim holidays or Halloween is evil and just are so against it, but then they're out here celebrating Christmas and all these other holidays. I do consider myself a Christian, or like in recent years more of like a just spiritualist, because like I feel like I don't need a building to worship, and like I don't need a leader to kind of like tell me what to do. I feel like I can pray and read and kind of just focus on more of my personal relationship with God. And I don't feel like I need a building or a person for that. I feel like it should be personal, a personal thing. So, but no, there I see a lot of extremists in Christian Christian denominations and other religious denominations. Not talk about pagans. I'm talking about Christian, like cat, like those denominations. I see a lot of extremists. There's a lot of religious extremists out there that say, "Oh, you should do this. You can't." And it's like they're trying to tell all the other religious groups and other people what to do, and it's like that's not right. Like you can't pick and choose stuff and be nitpicky like that. And that's what I just don't understand about Christianity. That's my issue with Christianity. Like I technically my label would be a Christian, but I've kind of moved away from that because I just don't like how people are acting and treating others for the sake of religion and Christianity, saying, "Oh, well, I can do this because the Bible said this, or because God told me to do that." Like, no, no, just no. I looked into that scripture, Jeremiah 10, and it's not talking about Christmas trees. To me, it's more talking about pride. Pride, showing off. It's not talking about Christmas trees. Here, once again, and scripture is not all scripture like has like an exact meaning. Like a lot of it is very open to interpretation. So a lot of people, everybody could read the same verse and interpret it differently, which is interesting. So that's my argument. And I mean, people can agree with me, not agree with me. I just see a lot of issues um, within Christianity and other religious denominations, just with nitpicking and choosing what's good, what's not, or just being awful, or just yeah, just being awful because they use the Bible or whatever, like just to excuse their awful behavior, which I don't agree with. So yeah. There was the whole Doja Cat controversy with her. I think it was Demon or Demons, her music video where she dressed up like a demon. One of my friends on Facebook, she was like, "Don't let your kids watch this. It's gonna invite the devil and demons into your home." I'm like, first of all, she's just doing it for like artistic expression. There's no demon worship or any demonic stuff in it. She's just dressed like a demon in her mind, what a demon would look like. There's no pro Satanism or any demonic stuff. So I was just like, no. And yeah, I just didn't understand. I'm like, it's she's using artistic expression to express herself through music and stuff. I'm like, it's not a demonic thing. And I'm like, second, I'm like, if you're that worried about what your kids are watching and stuff, like maybe you should limit their screen time and do like parental controls and stuff. Like you shouldn't be telling other people like what to allow their kids to watch and do and stuff. I'm like, that's not cool. Like yeah, like I just said earlier, like picking and choosing and saying, "Oh, you like my opinion is better than yours," like whatever. Like I hope I'm making sense. I woke up early this morning and drove 2 hours up north, and I am exhausted. So hopefully I'm making sense. And then the Hocus Pocus 2 controversy. Oh my gosh, that was ridiculous. That there was a lady on TikTok, yeah, or somewhere I saw it, and she was saying kind of the same thing that my friend on Facebook was saying about Doja Cat. They're like, don't don't watch Hocus Pocus 2 with your kids. You're gonna invite evil spirits and witchcraft into your house. And it's gonna teach your daughters are gonna want to learn magic and witchcraft and like evil stuff. And I'm like, no, like it's a Disney movie. It's fictional. From what I've just explained in this episode about paganism, it's not entirely accurate and realistic. So I'm like, once again, stop telling people like what to watch, what to do. I'm like, you gotta think logically. You can't blame your religion and your beliefs. You can't use it to stir drama and just make up stuff if that makes sense. It's just interesting. Unfortunately, persecution by Christians seems to be a prevalent issue, and I hope one day we can all let people be who they want to be without causing unnecessary drama. There's so much going on in the world, and just so much we should just let people do what they want to do, as long as it's not hurting themselves, their families, or other people. I say let people do it. Worship what they want, do what they want, as long as it's not harmful or crazy or anything. Just let people be without causing issues and saying, "Well, this is what I think," and da da da. Yeah, and social media has just made it too easy for people. So, yeah, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the podcast. Thank you so much for listening. I'm really enjoying this. I'm gonna have some breaks coming up from work and college, so hopefully I can record and research and do some more episodes very soon. But thank you so much for listening to this one. Hopefully I didn't go off on a tangent in a soapbox and I didn't offend anybody. Hopefully you could understand what I was trying to say. Everything made sense. I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Ghosts, Demons, and Murder. Oh my! Um, November is Native American Heritage Month, so I'm thinking doing a little bonus, little short episode on Native American ghost stories, monsters, and such. Um, we'll see what happens. Just stay tuned for a third episode. Um, thank you for listening and have a great day.